Thanks for watching the video. I was the one who suggested the hike. That is the part I cannot stop coming back to. My brother Marcus did not want to go. His girlfriend Tanya did not want to go. Even my own girlfriend at the time, Liz, had said she would rather spend the long weekend at the cabin playing cards and drinking wine. But I pushed. I had found this place online, a set of old logging roads and hiking paths in a stretch of national forest in eastern Tennessee, and I had built it up in my head as the highlight of our trip. 4 days in a rented cabin near the Smokies, and I wanted at least 1 day of real hiking, something off the beaten path, something that would make for good photos and a good story. I got my good story, I just wish I had not. We arrived at the cabin on a Thursday evening in late September, and the place was beautiful, a small A-frame set back from a gravel road with nothing around it but forest and a distant ridge. We unpacked, made dinner, sat on the porch and listened to the night sounds. Owls, crickets, the occasional rustle of something moving through the leaves. Marcus opened a beer and said this was all he needed for the whole trip, and I remember thinking he was being lazy. I wish I had agreed with him. Friday morning I laid out my plan. I had downloaded a trail map from a forestry website that showed a network of old roads and footpaths about 30 minutes north of the cabin. The main route was a wide gravel road that led to an old fire tower, long decommissioned but still standing. From there, several footpaths branched off into the surrounding hills. I wanted us to hike to the tower, and then pick one of the footpaths for a few miles before looping back. Total distance maybe 8 or 9 miles, which was ambitious for a group that included 2 people who did not hike regularly, but I figured we had all day. We drove north on a Forest Service road until it dead-ended at a metal gate. Beyond the gate, the gravel road continued on foot, wide and flat, easy walking. The morning was cool and overcast, with a thick layer of gray cloud sitting on the mountains like a lid. Marcus grumbled but kept pace. Tanya turned out to be a faster walker than any of us, and pulled ahead almost immediately. Liz walked beside me, her camera out, stopping every few minutes to photograph ferns or fungus or the pattern of light through the leaves. The fire tower appeared after about an hour and a half of walking. It was exactly as I had expected from the photos online, a steel frame structure maybe 50 feet tall with a small enclosed cab at the top. The stairs looked rusted but intact. We climbed up one at a time and sat in the cab, which still had its windows, though most were cracked. The view was enormous, rolling green ridges fading into gray haze in every direction. I took a photo of the 4 of us up there, squeezed together on the narrow bench, and I still have it. It is the last photo where all 4 of us look happy. After we climbed down, I studied the trail map on my phone. 3 footpaths branched off from the fire tower clearing. 1 went east along the ridge. 1 went south, back toward a different section of the forest road. Oh, and 1 went northwest into a narrow valley between 2 hills. The northwest path was the longest but also the most scenic according to the notes on the map. It passed through old-growth forest and eventually connected back to the main road about 2 miles from where we had parked. A nice loop. "Let's do the northwest one," I said. We found the trailhead easily, marked by a small wooden post with a faded arrow. The path was narrow but clear, single file, winding between large trees and mossy boulders. For the first mile it was pleasant. The overcast sky kept the temperature comfortable, and the forest was the kind of old growth you see in nature documentaries, massive trunks, thick canopy, green light filtering down like we were walking through stained glass. Then Tanya, who was still in the lead, stopped. "There's another path." She was right. The trail we were on continued straight, but to our left a second trail branched off at a sharp angle, heading steeply downhill into the valley between the two hills. It was narrower than the main trail, maybe 2 feet wide, but it was clearly a trail, not a game path. The ground was worn down to bare earth. And the vegetation on either side had been cut back. Someone had maintained this trail, and recently. I checked my map. There was no second trail at this point. The northwest path ran straight for another mile before beginning its arc back to the main road. No branches, no side trails, nothing. "It's not on the map," I said. "So what?" Marcus said. "Half the trails out here probably aren't on any map. Old hunting paths, log-in skids, whatever. It goes down into the valley," Tanya said. "I bet there's a creek down there. I can hear water." I listened. She was right. Faintly, from below and to the left, I could hear the sound of moving water. It was a clean, bright sound, the kind of sound that on a normal day would have been inviting. "Let's check it out," Marcus said, and I remember being surprised because he had been the reluctant one all morning, but something about that side trail seemed to have caught his interest. Tanya was already a few steps down it. Liz looked at me and shrugged. 20 minutes, I said. "If it doesn't go anywhere interesting, we come back up." We started down the side trail. It was steep but manageable, switching back and forth across the hillside in tight zigzags. The trees here were different from the ones above. They were older, thicker, and many of them had a strange quality I did not notice at first but that Liz pointed out. The bark was unusually smooth, almost polished, as if something had been rubbing against them repeatedly over a long period of time, and they were all leaning slightly in the same direction, downhill toward the valley floor, and as if they were bending to look at something. The sound of water grew louder as we descended. After about 10 minutes, the trail leveled out, and we found ourselves on the floor of the valley. It was narrow, maybe 100 yards across, with steep walls of forested hillside rising on either side. The creek was there, about 15 feet wide, running over smooth stones with clear water that looked like it should have been on a postcard, except for one thing. On the far side of the creek, set back about 20 feet from the water, there was a stone wall. Not a natural rock formation, a wall. It was about 3 feet high and ran parallel to the creek for as far as I could see in both directions before the valley curved out of sight. The stones were stacked without mortar, flat and gray, fitted together with obvious intention. It was old, clearly very old, but it was also remarkably intact. No trees were growing through it. No sections had collapsed. It looked like it had been maintained. "What is that?" Tanya said. "Old homestead wall, probably," I said. "These mountains are full of them. People lived in these valleys 100 years ago." "That doesn't look 100 years old," Liz said. She was right. It looked like it could have been built last year. We crossed the creek on stepping stones and approached the wall. Up close, the stones were unusual. They were all the same shade of gray, and they were warm to the touch, noticeably warmer than the air temperature. I pressed my palm against one. It felt like it had been sitting in sunlight for hours, but we were in a deep valley under heavy cloud cover. There was no sunlight reaching this spot. Marcus walked along the wall to the left, where the valley curved. He disappeared around the bend for maybe 30 seconds, then came back quickly. "There's more," he said. His voice had changed. The casual, slightly bored tone was gone. "A lot more. The wall keeps going, and there are other structures, foundations, like the remains of buildings." We followed him around the curve. He was not exaggerating. Beyond the bend, the valley widened slightly, and the ground on the far side of the creek was covered with stone structures, low walls outlining rectangular shapes. What appeared to be the base of a chimney, a set of stone steps leading down to a flat area that might have been a cellar. all made from the same gray stone, all in the same impossible condition, all warm to the touch. It looked like a village, a small, very old village that had been reduced to its foundations, but somehow preserved perfectly at that level. No moss, no lichen, no tree roots breaking through. Just clean gray stone, slightly warm, sitting in the permanent shadow of the valley. Liz took photographs. Tanya explored the foundations, stepping carefully over the low walls. Marcus stood in the center of it all, turning slowly in a circle. I watched his face because something about his expression was bothering me. He did not look curious or excited. He looked like he was remembering something. Marcus? What? You okay? Yeah. He did not look at me. This place feels familiar. You've never been here. I know. I let it go, but it stayed with me. I started walking the perimeter, following the creek upstream. The stone structures continued along both banks for about 200 yards, and then they stopped abruptly, as if someone had drawn a line across the valley and said the village ends here. Beyond that line, the valley was just forest and creek and normal rock. I turned back, and that is when I noticed the sound, or rather the absence of it. The creek was still flowing. I could see it, but I could no longer hear it. The water moved over the stones in complete silence. I knelt beside it and put my hand in. The water was there, cold and wet and real, but it made no sound at all. I scooped some up and let it fall back. Nothing. Like watching a video on mute. Guys, I called out. My own voice sounded strange, thinner than it should have been, as if something was pressing down on it. We should go. Nobody argued. We crossed the creek and found the trail that led back up the hillside. We started climbing, and the sound of the water returned gradually, like someone slowly turning up a volume dial. By the time we reached the top, the forest sounded normal again. Birds, wind, the faint drip of moisture from the canopy. We stepped back onto the main northwest trail. I turned around to look at the side trail we had just climbed. It was not there. The forest closed seamlessly where the side trail had been. There was no gap in the trees, no worn earth, no cut vegetation. I walked to the exact spot where Tanya had first stopped and pointed it out. I ran my hand along the tree trunks. Unbroken bark, undisturbed moss, leaf litter that looked like it had been accumulating for years. That's not possible, Liz whispered. Where did we just come from? Tanya asked, and her voice was rising. Where did we just come from? Where is the trail? I tried to stay calm. I told everyone we were fine. We were on the main trail. We knew where we were. We just needed to keep walking and get back to the car. I said the side trail must have been hard to see, and we were just looking in the wrong spot. I did not believe it, but I needed everyone to keep moving. We hiked the rest of the northwest trail in near silence. It connected back to the main road exactly where the map said it would, and we followed the road back to the car. The gate was there. The car was there. Everything was normal. In the car, Tanya said, someone should say it. Nobody did for a while. Then Marcus, staring out the window, said, that village has been there for a very long time, and someone does not want people to know about it. What do you mean, someone? Liz asked. I mean, the trail showed up for us, and then disappeared behind us. Trails don't do that on their own. Marcus, trails don't do that at all. He did not respond. We drove back to the cabin. That night, we sat around the kitchen table and tried to process it. Tanya had a theory about old Cherokee settlements and spiritual sites. Liz thought there might be a rational explanation involving logging roads and seasonal erosion. Marcus said nothing for most of the conversation. He just sat there with his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring at the wall. I pulled up the forestry website again and looked at the trail map. The northwest path was there, exactly as I had downloaded it. No side trail, no valley marked. I switched to satellite view and studied the area between the two hills where the valley should have been. The canopy was so thick I could not see the ground, but the topography showed a valley, a narrow crease between the two ridges, right where we had been. Then I did something I cannot fully explain. I pulled up historical maps of the area, county records, old survey maps, anything I could find online. I found a hand-drawn map from 1903 that showed the same stretch of national forest before it was national forest, when it was still privately owned land. On that map, in the valley between the two ridges, there was a small cluster of squares labeled with a single word, dwell. That was it. No other notation. Just dwell, written in faded ink next to a cluster of tiny rectangles. I searched every database I could find for a settlement called Dwell in eastern Tennessee. Nothing. No census records, no church records, no land deeds, no newspaper mentions, a place with buildings and a name, and absolutely no record of it ever having people in it. I showed Marcus the next morning. He looked at the map for a long time. I dreamed about it last night, he said, about the valley. About living there. I was in one of those buildings. It had a roof and walls and a fire, and there were other people, but I couldn't see their faces. They were all turned away from me, and they were humming. This low, constant hum, all of them together, like they were generating the sound as a group. It was just a dream. It wasn't just a dream, and you know it. He was right. I had dreamed about it too. Not the same dream, but the same place. In mine, I was standing in the creek, and the water was flowing around my legs in complete silence, and I was looking at the stone wall, and the wall was taller than it had been, 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet, growing as I watched. And behind it I could hear people, not words, just the sound of human presence, breathing, shifting, the soft sounds of bodies occupying space. A community living just on the other side of a wall I could not see over. We left the cabin a day early. Nobody wanted to stay. The drive home was quiet, and in the weeks that followed, the four of us talked about it less and less until we stopped talking about it entirely. Liz and I broke up a few months later for unrelated reasons, or at least reasons I told myself were unrelated. Tanya and Marcus are still together. We have never gone back to Tennessee. But here is the thing I need to say, the reason I am telling this now. 3 months ago, Marcus called me. It was late, almost midnight, and he sounded like he had not slept in days. He told me the dreams had never stopped. He said he had been dreaming about the valley every single night since our trip, and the dreams were getting longer and more detailed. He said he now knew the layout of the village completely, every building, every wall, every stone. He said he could draw it from memory. He said the people in the dreams had started turning toward him, and he was beginning to see their faces. They look like us, he said. Not exactly like us, like older versions of us, like what we would look like if we had lived there our whole lives, weathered, worn down, but us. I told him he needed to talk to someone, a therapist, a doctor, someone qualified. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I went back, he said. What? Last month. I drove to the forest. I hiked the Northwest Trail. I looked for the side trail. My stomach dropped. Marcus, you tell me you didn't find it. He was quiet for a long time. It was there, he said. It was right there, exactly where it was before. I stood at the top and I could hear the creak, and I could hear the humming, and I could feel it pulling me, like the trail was a throat and I was being swallowed. Did you go down? No, but I stood there for 2 hours, and leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. It felt like walking away from home. He asked me to promise I would never go back, and I promised. Then he asked me something that I have not been able to stop thinking about. Do you think it was already there when we found it? Or do you think it appeared because we were there? I did not have an answer then, and I do not have one now. What I do know is this. 2 weeks after that phone call, I was at home. I'm getting ready for bed, and I heard it. Faint, almost below the threshold of hearing, coming from somewhere beneath the floor, or maybe from much further down than that. A low, constant hum. Not mechanical, not electrical. Human. The sound of voices blending together into a single sustained note. It lasted about 10 seconds, and then it was gone. I have heard it 3 times since. Each time it is slightly louder. Each time it lasts slightly longer. I do not know what the valley is. I do not know if dwell is a name or a description or an instruction. I do not know why it showed us a trail and then erased it, or why it visits us in dreams, or why it is beginning to make itself heard in places far from Tennessee. But I know this. We took a trail that was not on any map, and we saw a place that should not exist, and we walked away thinking we had escaped. But I do not think we escaped. I think we were given a taste, a glimpse, a sample, and whatever dwell is, it is patient, and it remembers us, and it is slowly, gently, persistently inviting us back. If you are ever hiking in the mountains, and you find a trail that is not on your map, one that goes downhill into a valley, one that feels like it is pulling you forward, I am telling you now, with everything I have, do not follow it. Because the trail will not be there when you try to come back, and whatever is at the bottom will already have started learning your name. Remember, some places don't want you to leave. Thanks for watching the video.